You've seen computer glitches, but the truth is, reality has them too. These are the strange, fascinating, and sometimes terrifying ways your mind and body short-circuit, as if there's a flaw in the code. Let's start with the big ones, the moments that make reality itself feel broken. Shared dreams. You wake up from a dream and then hear someone else describe the exact same thing. Same place, same details, even the same bizarre characters. That feels like a glitch in the system, right? Scientists don't have a perfect answer, but here's what we do know. When you spend a lot of time with someone, your brains fill up with the same ingredients. Shows you watched, conversations you had, stress you've both been under. Those details often sneak into your dreams, and if your sleep cycles happen to line up, outside noises like a buzzing phone or a barking dog can slip into both dreams at the same moment, leaving you with eerily similar scenes. Dreams also recycle. The brain loves running familiar scripts, being chased, falling, forgetting a test, so two people can end up pulling from the same template without realizing it. Then there's the stranger side. Some people swear they've met up in a lucid dream, trading info they shouldn't know. Evidence? Pretty much none. Fascination? Off the charts. Acquired savant syndrome. One day you can't even play chopsticks on the piano. The next, after a head injury or illness, you're performing like a world-class concert pianist. It sounds impossible, but it's a documented glitch called acquired savant syndrome. In rare cases, trauma to the brain seems to unlock hidden abilities, mathematical genius, artistic mastery, musical fluency, or other extraordinary skills that weren't there before. Scientists think it has to do with the way the brain reroutes itself after damage. When one pathway shuts down, others can suddenly light up, giving access to abilities normally buried under the noise of everyday thought. It's like your brain has cheat codes hidden deep in the system, and every once in a while, an accident accidentally enters the right combination. It's one of the rarest, strangest glitches ever documented. But when it happens, it completely rewrites what we think is possible for the human mind. Sleep paralysis. You wake up in the middle of the night, fully aware, but your body won't move. You try to scream, nothing comes out. Then you see it. A shadowy figure standing in the corner of your room, or sometimes even sitting on your chest. Terrifying doesn't even begin to cover it. This is sleep paralysis. It happens when your brain wakes up, but your body is still locked in rematonia, the paralysis that keeps you from acting out your dreams. For a few seconds, or even minutes, you're trapped in a glitch between dreaming and waking. The hallucinations feel real because your brain is still half in dream mode, projecting images into your waking environment. Strangely, people report eerily similar encounters: demons, witches, shadow people. The science is solid, but when you can't breathe and something's staring at you from the dark, explanations don't make it any less horrifying. Out-of-body experiences, also known as OBEs. Picture this. You're lying in bed or on an operating table, and suddenly you're floating above your own body, looking down at yourself like a spectator. That's the classic out-of-body experience. It often happens during trauma, extreme stress, or near-death moments, but some people report it during meditation or even at random. Scientists suspect it's tied to the temporoparietal junction, a region that helps stitch together your sense of self in space. When it misfires, your perspective can glitch, tricking you into thinking you've left your body. OBEs have also been documented under anesthesia and during seizures, which suggests the effect can be triggered when the brain's balance and orientation systems are disrupted. The strangest part is that people sometimes describe details they supposedly couldn't have seen, like the layout of a room or what doctors were doing during surgery. Whether that's coincidence, heightened memory, or something beyond our understanding, OBEs remind us just how slippery the boundary is between where our mind ends and where reality begins. Mass hysteria. Imagine an entire town suddenly dancing until they collapse from exhaustion, or a school where dozens of students start fainting one after another with no clear medical cause. That's mass hysteria, sometimes called mass psychogenic illness, and it's one of the strangest glitches in human behavior. It usually starts with a trigger: stress, fear, or even just one person showing mysterious symptoms. Others around them unconsciously pick it up, and before long, entire groups are laughing uncontrollably, fainting, or developing the same phantom pains. What makes it so bizarre is that the symptoms feel absolutely real, even though there's no virus, no toxin, nothing measurable in the body. History is full of examples. The dancing plague of 1518, when hundreds of people in Strasbourg danced for days, some until they died. Or the Tanganyika laughter epidemic of 1962, where uncontrollable laughter spread through villages for months. These kinds of episodes often show up under similar conditions: tight-knit groups under intense pressure, and a contagious spark of suggestion that spreads like wildfire. Science points to psychology and group dynamics, but why the mind can turn shared stress into full-blown outbreaks of strange behavior still isn't completely understood. It's almost as if one mind glitches and the whole group crashes with it. Synesthesia. You hear a song, and suddenly you see colors. Or you look at a number, and it has a taste or even a personality. If that sounds familiar, you might have synesthesia, a neurological glitch where the senses get crosswired. It isn't just imagination. Brain scans show that people with synesthesia have extra connections between sensory regions. So when you hear a sound, the visual part of your brain lights up too. For some, letters and numbers are associated with colors. For others, shapes have flavors, or music feels like a physical touch. What makes it so strange is how consistent it is. If the letter A is red for you once, it's always red, every single time. Scientists still debate whether this crosswiring gives hidden advantages in memory or creativity, but for people who live with it, it's like the world is running in 4K with bonus features most of us never get to experience. Placebo effect. Ever taken something you thought would help, and it actually did, even though it couldn't have? That's the placebo effect, a psychological glitch that produces real biological results. Doctors first noticed it when patients reported feeling better after receiving fake treatments in clinical trials. It wasn't all in their heads. Brain scans showed their bodies releasing endorphins, dopamine, and activating pain control circuits as if the drug were real. And it's not just with pills. Fake knee surgeries left patients walking with less pain. Sham inhalers helped asthma sufferers breathe easier. And imitation acupuncture still produced measurable relief. The brain wasn't cured by the treatment. It was cured by the belief. Scientists think it happens because expectation itself can dial down pain signals in the nervous system and reduce stress hormones in the body. But here's the part that keeps scientists guessing. It doesn't happen to everyone. Two people can take the same sugar pill. One gets better, the other feels nothing at all. Spontaneous human combustion. Every so often, you'll hear a story that sounds like pure urban legend. A person found reduced to ash while the room around them is barely touched. That's the unsettling puzzle of spontaneous human combustion, a phenomenon that's baffled investigators for centuries. In these cases, the body is intensely burned, sometimes almost completely cremated, without any clear external source of fire. Early theories range from static electricity to divine intervention. Today, the leading theory is the wick effect, where clothing ignites and body fat acts as a slow-burning fuel source. The problem is, while the wick effect explains a lot, it doesn't explain every case. Some instances show burn patterns too peculiar to fit neatly into that theory. And that's why spontaneous human combustion remains one of those rare, eerie puzzles that still defies a perfect explanation. Doppelgangers. Imagine running into someone who looks exactly like you. Same face, same expressions, maybe even eerily similar mannerisms. These uncanny doubles, called doppelgangers, have been turning heads and sparking myths for centuries. Folklore once painted them as bad omens, but modern science has its own take. With billions of people on Earth, random chance alone means some will end up looking nearly identical. Genes only have so many combinations, and sometimes they line up in ways that produce convincing copies. The crazy thing is, studies have found unrelated lookalikes often share genetic markers and even lifestyle traits, like similar habits or risks for the same health conditions. In other words, your double might not just look like you, they could live like you too. Near-death experiences. Across cultures, people who've come back from the brink of death describe the same haunting patterns: a tunnel of light, an overwhelming sense of peace, or a rapid-fire review of their life. These reports are what we call near-death experiences, and they've been recorded for centuries. Scientists have a few theories. Oxygen deprivation can cause vision to narrow into a tunnel. Neurochemical surges under extreme stress can flood the brain with euphoria and vivid imagery. And studies of cardiac arrest patients show bursts of organized brain activity even after the heart has stopped, which may explain why the experiences feel so intense and real. Still, many accounts go beyond tunnels and lights. People describe meeting long-lost relatives, encountering figures like Jesus, or experiencing something more real than life itself. That's what makes near-death experiences so powerful. They defy scientific explanation, leaving us all wondering what really happens after we pass on. The lottery curse. You dream of hitting the jackpot, but for a surprising number of winners, that dream turns into a nightmare. People who suddenly come into millions often spiral into bankruptcy, addiction, or fractured relationships within just a few years. Psychologists say the brain isn't wired to handle that kind of instant wealth. The sudden rush of status and expectation can overload decision-making, amplify hidden problems, and even attract people who want to exploit you. What should feel like freedom ends up feeling like pressure from every side. There are winners who've managed to hold on to their fortune, but the truth is, far more lose it all, ending up worse off than before. It's almost as if money, when it comes too fast, acts like a glitch in the system, throwing life off balance instead of fixing it. The Mandela effect. Ever been absolutely certain you remembered something a certain way, only to find out it never happened like that? That's the Mandela effect. It's when huge groups of people misremember the same detail. Like the Monopoly man wearing a monocle even though he never had one. Or Darth Vader supposedly saying, "Luke, I am your father," when the actual line is different. Psychologists say it happens because memory isn't a perfect recording. It's a reconstruction. Each time you recall something, your brain pieces it back together, sometimes slipping in details that feel just as real as the truth. Culture then reinforces the mistake. Parodies, jokes, and casual retellings spread the wrong version until it's more familiar than the original. And once enough people share the same error, it doesn't just feel like bad memory anymore. It's a whole alternate reality bleeding through. Science calls it faulty memory. Pop culture calls it proof we might be slipping between parallel timelines. Either way, it's just a strange reminder that even our most vivid memories can't always be trusted. You don't need a supernatural event to experience a glitch. Your own brain does it every day, and most of the time, it just makes you feel stupid. Prediction loop failure. You see it coming. The coffee cup teetering on the edge, the full glass next to your elbow. You lock eyes with the danger like it's a movie in slow motion, and then you knock it over anyway. Prediction loop failure happens when your brain simulates an upcoming action and still lets it happen. Your motor system plans movement slightly in advance. Meanwhile, your perceptual system flags a problem. But those two don't always sync. The brain sees the future mistake, even simulates it, but doesn't override the muscle memory already in motion. It's a disconnect between recognition and inhibition. You know what's about to happen. Your brain even throws up a warning preview, but without strong enough urgency or friction to halt the action, you follow through anyway, as if the preview was part of the plan. Tip of the tongue. You know the word. You can feel its shape in your mind. You know how many syllables it has. You even know what letter it starts with. But when you open your mouth, all that comes out is static and shame. The tip of the tongue phenomenon happens when your brain retrieves most of a word's information, but not the actual word itself. It's like the brain grabbed the folder, but not the file. The concept, context, and even sound structure are loaded. But the final step, lexical access, is missing from the chain. This glitch usually happens with proper nouns or uncommon words because those are stored less redundantly. If you forget the word air fryer, your brain can still reach it through kitchen thing or that noisy cube that makes fake fries. But forget the name of that actor from that one movie and you're left with a blinking cursor and a slow descent into madness. The failure comes from a mismatch between recognition and retrieval. You can picture the actor's face, the scene, the soundtrack, but not the name. The shape of the memory is there, but the label won't load. The harder you try, the worse it gets. Your brain tightens its search criteria and locks out access. That's why the name almost always comes back at 3 a.m. long after you've stopped caring. Semantic satiation. You're writing something perfectly normal, the word knee, let's say, and then, out of nowhere, the word looks completely fake. The letters are wrong, the spacing is weird, you're suddenly convinced you've invented a nonsense word, and your brain refuses to accept it. This is a form of semantic satiation, when repeated exposure to the same word or image starts to break down your perception of it. Neurons involved in recognition start to fatigue, and the brain's confidence in that pattern begins to fall apart. The result is visual dissonance. A familiar word starts looking alien, and your internal dictionary turns its back on you. It doesn't just happen when you're writing either. Repeat any word enough times, take milk, for example, and it stops sounding like language and starts sounding like a mistake. You'll question whether that's what we've always called it, or if you just invented a noise. Your brain relies on fluent pattern recognition to make words feel real. Break that rhythm, and the brain breaks with it. Post-task memory wipe. You put on deodorant, or maybe you didn't. You unplug the curling iron, lock the front door, close the garage. At least, you think you did. But 5 seconds later, you're halfway down the block, questioning whether any of it actually happened. Post-task memory wipe happens when the brain treats a completed action as a background process, something handled automatically, without storing a clear memory of it. Once the task is done, your brain clears the space to make room for what's next. The result? You're left rewinding the moment in your head, trying to remember if it actually happened. This is especially common with high-frequency tasks, the ones you do often and on autopilot. The brain doesn't bother to encode a detailed memory because it assumes you'll do it again soon. It values efficiency over certainty. So you check and double-check and triple-check, not because you're forgetful, but because your brain genuinely didn't bother to save the file. Freudian slip. You're talking to your boss, and you accidentally say, "love you," before hanging up. You meant thank you, or maybe bye, but your brain chose chaos. That's a Freudian slip, when your mouth reveals something your conscious brain didn't plan to say. Technically called parapraxis, this happens when two competing neural signals overlap, what you meant to say and what your brain associates with the situation. The result is a verbal misfire, where parts of different speech plans merge and something unintended, and often uncomfortably revealing, comes out. Not every Freudian slip is a secret confession. Sometimes it's just word proximity. You call your teacher mom because both live in the same mental filing cabinet. Authority, routine, attention. Your brain grabs the wrong folder, and your mouth runs with it. But sometimes it is a little telling. You meant to say, "that was a bold move," but it comes out as, "that was a bald move." Now the person's wondering what you really think of their haircut. And honestly, so are you. Deja vu. You're deep in conversation with someone you just met and suddenly, it hits you. The exact way they said that sentence, the pause, the room. It all feels like it's happened before, only it never did. That's déjà vu, the eerie, involuntary feeling that you've already experienced something that's actually happening for the first time. It's a perception glitch, where the brain mislabels the present as a memory. One theory says your brain processes the same moment twice, once subconsciously, then again a split second later with full awareness. When that second version arrives, your memory system picks up on the faint echo and wrongly tags it as a repeat. The moment feels familiar only because it was just seen, not remembered. Another theory points to a neural misfire in the medial temporal lobe, particularly the hippocampus and surrounding regions that manage familiarity. The circuitry that usually flags past experiences fires off at the wrong time, making a brand new moment feel like a memory, even when no memory exists. It's not a psychic premonition, it's not proof of a past life, it's just your brain playing a strange version of double-take and tricking you into thinking you've been here before. Misplacing object in plain sight. You're staring right at the thing you need, your keys, your phone, the charger, but somehow you don't see it. You look everywhere, you check the counter twice, then, 5 minutes later, it turns out it was on the counter the whole time. This is a failure of visual attention, not eyesight. Your eyes may land on the object, but if your brain doesn't expect it to be there, it filters it out. Vision isn't just about receiving information, it's about interpreting what matters. If the object doesn't match your mental search image, your brain treats it like background noise and moves on. Context matters more than clarity. If you're looking for your black phone and it's sitting on a dark granite countertop, your brain might literally blind itself to it. And then your mom or your partner walks in, points right at it, and says, "It's right there." It feels like they've been gifted with some magical object-finding power, but really, their attention just isn't being hijacked by your search bias. Your brain prioritizes what it thinks should be relevant and ignores the rest. It's the same reason you can miss a typo in a sentence you've read 10 times. Familiarity makes your brain stop checking. The object isn't hiding, your attention is. Accidental thought swap. You're halfway through a sentence when your brain suddenly tries to change lanes. 2 thoughts, 1 mouth. You end up saying something like, "I need to charge my dinner." This glitch happens when your brain is juggling multiple speech plans and accidentally merges them. You were about to say, "charge my phone," but were also thinking about what to make for dinner. Your brain tries to say both, and your mouth catches the crossfire. Your brain doesn't generate speech one word at a time. It builds entire sentence structures in advance. When 2 of those structures start competing, pieces get swapped, spliced, or overwritten. The result is a sentence that's grammatically correct but conceptually broken. It's a multitasking error in your language buffer. And even though it makes you sound like you've lost your mind, it's incredibly common, especially when you're tired, distracted, or already thinking about what you're going to say next. False memories. You remember exactly where you were, what you were wearing, who was there, what was said, you'd swear on it, but none of it actually happened. False memories aren't just bad recall. They're confident, vivid recollections of things that didn't occur. Your brain generates them using the same systems it relies on for real memories. That's what makes them dangerous. You don't just think they're true, you know they are. Memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you recall an event, your brain pieces it back together from scattered fragments, sounds, visuals, emotions, context. And every time you recall it, the memory subtly changes. Details get smoothed out, swapped, or inserted, especially if you've talked about it, imagined it differently, or heard someone else describe it. And if you repeat it enough, even casually in conversation, the version you're saying becomes the version your brain saves. The repetition strengthens the false details until they become the memory. Eventually, it hardens into a clear, confident version that may be entirely fictional. And because it feels real, your brain files it under truth, often permanently. Sensory misrouting. You're driving at night, trying to find a street sign. It's dark. You're squinting. So naturally, you turn the music down. That makes no logical sense. Your ears aren't blocking your eyes, but your brain acts like they are. This is sensory misrouting, when your brain tries to improve performance in one area by reducing input in another, even when the 2 aren't connected. You're not being silly. This is how your brain manages limited cognitive resources. When the task load rises, your system starts muting the noise, literally and figuratively, to conserve bandwidth for whatever matters most. In reality, lowering the music doesn't improve your vision, but your brain's cross-modal attentional system assumes that fewer distractions will sharpen your focus, and it doesn't always care if the logic checks out. It's the same reason you instinctively turn things down to remember directions or pause a video to answer a complicated text. It's not synesthesia. It's just your brain misfiring its own priorities and deciding in that moment that volume is the bottleneck. Reading without absorbing. Your eyes read the entire sentence. You reach the end of the paragraph. You maybe even turn the page, but you remember nothing. This is what happens when your visual input runs on autopilot, but your attention never shows up. You technically read the words. Your eyes tracked each line. Your brain saw the sentences, but comprehension never kicked in. In other words, the lights were on, but nobody was home. It's not a reading problem. It's a focus allocation failure. Your brain decided some other internal process, a thought loop, a distraction, a random memory, mattered more than the text. So the reading got demoted to background noise. You kept going out of habit, like hearing a song you're not really listening to. This is why rereading the same paragraph 5 times doesn't help. It's not your memory that failed. It's that the memory never got created in the first place. If attention is the gatekeeper for learning, you never walk through the door. Repeating a story you forgot you told. You're halfway through a story, confident it's brand new, when your friend gives you that look. The one that says, "Yeah, you told me this already." And now you're trapped, too deep to stop, too embarrassed to keep going. This happens because your brain doesn't always tag memories with who heard them. It remembers the event of telling the story, but not the audience. So when you retrieve the memory, it feels like you've only thought about telling it, not actually said it out loud. It's a glitch in what's called source monitoring, the brain's ability to track where memories come from. You might vividly remember a conversation, a thought, or a scene, but not whether it was real, imagined, or already spoken. To your brain, thinking about telling someone a story and actually telling them can feel almost identical. The more vivid or rehearsed the memory, the easier it is to misfire. So you press play again, unaware that your audience already sat through the premiere. Forgetting mid-sentence. You're mid-thought, mid-sentence, and then nothing. You know there was a point. You know you were heading somewhere, but your brain drops the thread like a clumsy juggler, and all you're left with is a blank space in your skull. This kind of memory wipe happens when your working memory, the mental scratch pad where temporary information gets held, overloads or gets interrupted. Your brain was holding your thought like a tab open in a browser, but something, a noise, a sudden distraction, or just a stray intrusive idea, closed the tab before you saved your work. And the worst part? You often feel the shape of the thought. You know it was important. You can sense its urgency or its cleverness, but it's gone. Your brain just quietly ejected you from your own conversation. Frequency illusion, also known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. You learn a new word or buy a new model car, and suddenly it's everywhere. Billboards, articles, casual conversation. You can't help but wonder, was this always here? That's frequency illusion. Once your brain flags something as newly relevant, it shifts your attention to it. It doesn't actually appear more often. You just start noticing. The brain's pattern detector is hypersensitive to novelty plus repetition. That combination lights up your awareness system like a beacon. So when something new enters your mental database, whether it's a rare animal, a slang term, or a medical condition, your brain highlights every future sighting as significant, even if it's just coincidence. You're not manifesting it, and it's not a sign from the universe. It's just your brain updating its search algorithm. The doorway effect. You walk into a room and stop cold. Wait, why did you come in here? This isn't a memory problem, it's a context shift. Your brain chunks information into location-based packets, and crossing a physical threshold, like a doorway, can trigger it to flush the current working memory and prepare for new input. It treats the entry as a reset point. New room, new task. The information wasn't lost, it was shelved, but now it's been nudged out of reach, just far enough that you can't grab it. So you stand there, confused, until the original trigger, a visual cue, a smell, a thought fragment, resurfaces and the memory clicks back into place. That, or you go back into the room you came from and voila, you remember again. Your brain doesn't see a doorway, it sees a scene change, and sometimes the plot of the last one gets left behind. Of course, some of the weirdest bugs in the system only show up when the brain is supposed to be offline. Sleep paralysis. Imagine waking up in your bed, eyes open, brain fully alert, yet your body refuses to move a single muscle. That's sleep paralysis, and it happens when the normal mechanics of sleep get out of sync. During REM sleep, the stage when most vivid dreaming occurs, your brain deliberately paralyzes the body. This is called REM atonia, and it prevents you from physically acting out whatever's happening in your dreams. Normally, that paralysis lifts the moment you wake, but sometimes the transition misfires. Your consciousness turns back on while your body is still locked in dream mode. That's when people report the infamous experience of being pinned down, unable to breathe properly, and often feeling a presence in the room. Those terrifying figures or shadows aren't real intruders. They're hallucinations, created by your still active dreams spilling into wakefulness. In other words, your brain is overlaying dream imagery onto reality while you're trapped in a body that won't respond. It usually lasts less than 2 minutes, but in the moment, it feels much longer. The glitch itself is harmless, though terrifying enough to inspire centuries of folklore about demons sitting on chests or night spirits suffocating sleepers. The real explanation is much less supernatural. Your brain just booted up faster than your body did. Hypnic jerk. You're drifting off to sleep, body finally relaxing, when suddenly, bam! You feel like you're falling off a cliff and your whole body jolts awake. That's a hypnic jerk, also called a sleep start. As you enter stage 1 of sleep, your brain reduces motor neuron activity, which makes your muscles lose their usual tension. But sometimes your nervous system misinterprets the muscle relaxation as a sign that you're falling. In response, it fires off a burst of electrical signals, essentially slamming the panic button. The result? Your body twitches hard enough to yank you awake. The effect is stronger when you're sleep-deprived, stressed, or running on too much caffeine. Basically, the more wired you are, the more likely your brain is to trip its own alarm right as you're trying to power down. It's harmless, though embarrassing if it happens in public, like when you're dozing on a plane and jolts so hard you knock over your seatmate's drink. Nothing says pleasant travel companion like an involuntary arm flail at 30,000 feet. False awakening. You wake up, roll out of bed, maybe even start brushing your teeth, then realize you're still fast asleep. That's a false awakening, and it happens when your brain tricks you into dreaming about the act of waking up. During REM sleep, the brain's visual and sensory systems are highly active, almost as if you're awake. Sometimes that activity gets redirected toward familiar routines, like getting out of bed or starting the day. Because those actions are so ingrained, the dream version feels authentic enough to fool you. False awakenings often come in loops. In other words, you wake up multiple times, only to realize each one was still a dream. This looping happens because the brain is caught between REM sleep and actual wakefulness, bouncing back and forth instead of making a clean transition. It's almost like being stuck inside a low-budget sequel to Groundhog Day, where all you ever do is keep trying to get out of bed. Sleepwalking. Sleepwalking, or somnambulism, is when parts of your brain are asleep while others are wide awake. Normally, during deep, non-REM sleep, your body is kept still by a kind of built-in paralysis. But in sleepwalking, that system malfunctions. The motor control regions of the brain switch on, while the higher reasoning areas stay offline. The result? You can walk, cook, even try to drive, but you're operating with the judgment of a malfunctioning Roomba. Because the prefrontal cortex, the decision-making hub, is still asleep, most sleepwalking behaviors are repetitive and aimless. People might shuffle around the house, open and close doors, or rearrange objects without any real purpose. In more extreme cases, they may even attempt more complex tasks with no memory of it afterward. Genetics plays a role, and triggers include sleep deprivation, stress, alcohol, or even fevers. Kids are more prone to it because their brains spend more time in deep, slow-wave sleep, the stage where the mind is least responsive, making it easier for the body to go rogue. It's generally harmless, though the danger comes from the environment, stairs, stoves, or streets. Waking a sleepwalker isn't dangerous in itself, but letting them wander into traffic definitely is. Sleep apnea. You're fast asleep minding your own business when, suddenly, your throat decides to close up shop and block your breathing. Your body panics, jolts you just enough to gasp, and then shoves you back into sleep, only for the cycle to repeat dozens or even hundreds of times a night. That's sleep apnea. The most common type is obstructive sleep apnea, where the soft tissues of the throat relax too much during sleep and collapse into the airway. Less common is central sleep apnea, where the brain itself forgets to send the breathe now signals. In both cases, oxygen levels drop, sleep gets shredded into fragments, and your heart and brain never get the deep rest they're supposed to. From the outside, it's often noticed by partners first. Loud snoring punctuated by eerie stretches of silence, followed by a dramatic snort or choke as breathing restarts. It sounds less like peaceful slumber and more like someone losing a wrestling match with their own uvula. Left untreated, it's not just annoying. It raises the risk of high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and memory problems. The go-to fix is CPAP therapy, a mask that keeps airways pressurized so they stay open. Sure, it might look like you're suiting up for nighttime scuba diving, but it beats suffocating 200 times a night. Narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is the ultimate betrayal by your own brain. One moment you're wide awake, the next moment you're out cold. These sudden sleep attacks can strike in the middle of a meal, a meeting, or even mid-sentence, because the brain can't keep the boundary between sleep and wakefulness in place. To make matters worse, many people who suffer from narcolepsy also have cataplexy, a sudden loss of muscle tone triggered by strong emotions. Laugh too hard at a joke, and your knees might buckle like someone pulled the plug on your body. What's really happening is your REM paralysis system firing at the wrong time, dropping dream mode muscle shutdown into waking life. The culprit is usually a shortage of orexin, a neurotransmitter that acts like the brain's sleep-wake traffic cop. Without enough orexin, the system that's supposed to keep sleep and wake neatly separated starts blurring the lines. The result? Consciousness flickers like a faulty light switch, and the next thing you know, you flipped into dreamland with zero warning. Night terrors. Night terrors look like a scene out of a horror movie. Screaming, thrashing, eyes wide open. Yet the person isn't awake. Unlike nightmares, which happen during REM sleep and usually leave you with a vivid memory, night terrors occur in deep, non-REM sleep. That's why the person almost never remembers what happened the next morning. What's going on is a kind of partial arousal. The brain gets stuck between deep sleep and wakefulness, activating the body's fear response without fully switching on consciousness. Heart rate spikes, breathing quickens, and the body thrashes as if responding to a threat. But since the higher brain areas stay offline, the person isn't aware of their own panic. Night terrors are most common in children, though adults can get them too. When they strike, the episode itself usually lasts only a few minutes, but feels endless to anyone who can do nothing but watch it unfold. For the sleeper, it's mostly a blank space. For parents or partners, it's a front row seat to one of the most unsettling glitches in sleep. Watching someone fight invisible terrors they'll never remember, but a witness will never forget. Dreamtime distortion. You close your eyes for a short nap and dream an entire epic saga that feels like it lasted hours, maybe even days. Then you wake up and realize only 10 minutes have passed. That's dreamtime distortion. Your brain's uncanny ability to warp the sense of time inside dreams. During REM sleep, the brain processes information in a different rhythm than it does when awake. Without the usual cues from clocks, sunlight, or your internal circadian system, your perception of time gets distorted. The brain can compress events, skipping from scene to scene, or stretch them out, making seconds feel like entire chapters. Experiments back this up. When researchers signal sleepers during REM and ask them to count in their dreams, the timing is close to real time. But once you add storylines, emotions, and rapid scene changes, the brain plays fast and loose with the stopwatch. So if you wake up from what felt like a 3-hour feature film, only to find your clock swears you barely got through the opening credits, just know it's your brain having a bit of fun with time. Sleeptalking. Sleeptalking, or somniloquy, is when your mouth starts running while your conscious brain is still offline. Sleeptalking usually happens in light, non-REM sleep, when your vocal cords still have enough baseline muscle tone to move, letting words slip out as the brain's language circuits fire without the filter of full awareness. It's usually nonsense. Grunts, half-sentences, or random phrases stitched together like badly edited audio clips. But sometimes it's surprisingly clear, which is why roommates and partners love to retell the embarrassing highlights the next morning. Unlike sleepwalking, sleeptalking doesn't require the motor system to override paralysis. It only needs the vocal cords to kick on for a moment. That's enough to turn stray brain activity into actual words. Genetics, stress, fever, and sleep deprivation all raise the odds, making it all the more likely you'll wake up to reports that you held a 3 a.m. press conference about tacos. Bruxism. You wake up with your jaw sore, your head pounding, and your teeth feeling like they've been through a demolition derby. That's bruxism, the unconscious grinding or clenching of teeth during sleep. Normally, jaw muscles relax as you drift deeper into the night. But in bruxism, the brainstem pathways that control chewing don't fully switch off. Instead, they spike during micro-arousals, brief bursts of activity that happen as the brain shifts between sleep stages. Each spike sends a signal to the jaw muscles, and they clamp down with forces far stronger than normal chewing, powerful enough to do real damage over time. Dentists can spot it instantly. Your teeth take on that flattened, sanded-down look, as if you've been trying to gnaw your way out of a cage. That's usually their cue for a lecture, as if you've been doing it on purpose. You know, like everything else you do when you're unconscious. Meanwhile, your partner gets the real punishment, trying to nod off next to what sounds like a garbage disposal full of silverware. Nobody mentions that in their wedding vows. REM sleep behavior disorder. You're in the middle of a dream. Maybe you're running from something. Maybe you're throwing punches, and instead of staying in your head, your body decides to act it out. That's REM sleep behavior disorder, a glitch where the normal paralysis of REM sleep fails. Normally, REM keeps your body from moving so you don't act out your dreams, but in this disorder, that switch fails to engage. The dream commands fire down the nervous system, and without the usual break, the muscles obey. That's when partners report being kicked, punched, or even strangled by someone who's technically still asleep. Some people thrash around, others bolt out of bed, and a few even try to fight off imaginary intruders. It's dangerous not just for the sleeper, but for anyone within arm's reach. Researchers think it's related to the loss or dysfunction of dopamine-producing neurons in the brainstem. That's why it sometimes shows up years before neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's or Lewy body dementia. Whatever the cause, the effect is the same. Your dreams stop being private screenings and turn into live-action scenes. Nocturnal leg cramps. Few things can drag someone out of a deep sleep faster than the sudden, stabbing pain of a calf muscle seizing so violently it might rip itself in two. That's a nocturnal leg cramp, an involuntary muscle spasm that can flip you from dreaming to writhing in bed in seconds. It happens when motor neurons misfire and send a flood of signals that force the muscle fibers to contract all at once. Normally, these neurons quiet down during sleep, but dehydration, low minerals like potassium or magnesium, or even an odd foot position can make them unstable and trigger a spasm. When it finally lets go, the muscle aches like you just ran sprints in your sleep. Stretching, walking it off, or supplements might help, but in the moment, none of that matters. You're too busy clutching your leg and cursing biology. Klein Leven syndrome. Imagine sleeping 18 hours a day, not for one night, but for weeks at a time. That's Klein Leven syndrome, nicknamed Sleeping Beauty syndrome, though it's a lot less magical than it sounds. During an episode, people are overwhelmed by an irresistible need to sleep, often waking only to eat or stumble to the bathroom before crashing back into bed. The cause isn't fully understood, but evidence points to glitches in the hypothalamus and thalamus, the brain regions that regulate sleep, appetite, and body rhythms. Some researchers suspect it's tied to an autoimmune response or viral triggers that throw these systems off balance. When patients are awake during an episode, they're often not themselves. Confusion, irritability, disorientation, and even changes in behavior or appetite show up. It's like the brain has downshifted into survival mode, trimming everything to the bare minimum. Sleep, food, repeat. What makes it worse is the unpredictability. Episodes can last days to weeks, then vanish for months, only to come roaring back without warning. It's extremely rare, only a few hundred documented cases worldwide, but for the people who live with it, life gets carved into two states: the weeks lost almost entirely to unconsciousness and the anxious time spent waiting for the next round to hit. Restless leg syndrome. Restless leg syndrome isn't about pain. It's more like an itch you can't scratch, buried deep in your legs, sparking an overwhelming urge to move. People describe it as crawling, tingling, or buzzing sensations that flare up when they're lying down, especially at night. The only relief is movement, which is why so many end up pacing their bedrooms instead of sleeping. The leading theory is that restless leg syndrome stems from iron deficiency in the brain, particularly in dopamine-producing areas that control movement. Without enough iron, those brain networks go haywire, sending the move your leg signals even when you'd prefer to rest. Low vitamin B12 might also play a role, though the link isn't clearly proven. In some people, the condition fades away on its own, vanishing for months or years before returning, or never coming back at all. But when it sticks around, it shows up at the worst possible time, right when you're trying to wind down. Instead of drifting into sleep, your body forces you into a loop of shifting, stretching, or walking just to quiet the signals for a moment. It's less a bedtime routine than a hostage situation where your own legs are the captors. Sleep hallucinations. Picture this. You're half awake in bed when suddenly you see a figure standing in the corner, hear someone calling your name, or even feel something brushing against your skin. None of it is real. It's a sleep hallucination, a vivid sensory experience that happens at the edges of sleep, either as you're drifting off, in what's called the hypnagogic state, or as you're just waking up, in the hypnopompic state. What's happening is a clash between dream circuitry and waking consciousness. During REM sleep, the brain generates highly realistic imagery, sounds, and sensations as part of dreaming. Normally, that activity shuts down the second you awake. But if you wake up too suddenly or drift into sleep too slowly, your brain, caught between modes, overlays dream content onto reality. These hallucinations can be visual, auditory, or tactile. People often report shadowy figures, phantom voices, loud bangs, or a tap on the shoulder, all of which are very unsettling and feel very real. Sleep hallucinations tend to be more common with sleep deprivation, stress, or irregular schedules. In other words, if your brain is already running ragged, it's more likely to trip over its own wires and give you a flash of a nightmare before you're fully under or fully awake. And then there's your body, the biological machine that constantly malfunctions in hilarious, painful, or just plain dumb ways.
Brain freeze. You take a big slurp of a blue raspberry slushie. It tastes like electricity and childhood. 2 seconds later, your skull feels like it's detonating from the inside. That's brain freeze, officially called sphenopalatine ganglion neuralgia, which sounds like a spell you'd cast to paralyze someone in a duel. But here's what's actually happening. The cold hits the roof of your mouth, right where a major cluster of blood vessels sits. They constrict fast from the cold, then dilate rapidly once the brain tries to regulate the temperature. That sudden rebound sends a pain signal through the trigeminal nerve, which handles sensation in your head, face, and jaw. But the signal's messy. It's not marked mouth or palate, so your brain just shrugs and says, something's wrong. Must be the head? That's why pain racks your forehead and sometimes hits your nose, like your nervous system is just throwing darts. It's not dangerous. It's not helpful. But it is very real. A side effect of your body regulating temperature, with terrible aim. Blushing. Just the thought of being embarrassed does it. You feel your face go warm. Then the color follows, spreading up your neck and into your cheeks like a silent alarm. That's blushing. And even though it feels like your skin is outing your anxiety, it's actually your nervous system doing what it thinks is helpful. When you feel embarrassed, nervous, or self-conscious, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. It's the same fight-or-flight system that makes your heart race and your hands sweat. It dilates blood vessels in key areas, like your muscles, to get your body ready for action. But one of the side effects? The blood vessels in your face and neck also widen. More blood plus wider vessels equals more visible redness. And your face just happens to be one of the only places in your body where this reaction is so extreme, because it has tons of tiny capillaries just under the skin. Some scientists think blushing may also be a leftover social cue, like your body's way of signaling honesty or remorse without you saying a word. Cool in theory. Not so cool when it happens in the middle of a first date. Muscle cramps. You're lying in bed, half asleep. Then out of nowhere, a sudden stabbing pain in the bottom of your foot. That's a cramp. One moment your muscles are resting. The next, they're clenched in a death grip. What's actually happening? It's usually a chemistry problem, a mix of fatigue, dehydration, or missing electrolytes like magnesium, calcium, or potassium. Those imbalances mess with your motor neurons. Instead of firing smoothly, they go haywire, telling the muscle to flex, but not when to stop. Cramps seem to hit hardest at night or during rest, when your nervous system is idling, making it easier for one rogue signal to slip through. Then your foot locks up, and you're instantly wide awake, gripping your toes like you're trying to unsnap a mousetrap. It feels like something's about to tear, but in reality, it just hurts a lot and then it's gone. Your muscles will recover. Your trust in your own body? Maybe not so fast. Side stitch. You're 5 minutes into a run, cruising along just fine, and then it hits. Sharp pain under your ribcage, like someone jabbed you with a knitting needle. That's a side stitch. And weirdly, it almost never happens during anything else. You don't get one while driving. You don't get one brushing your teeth. So what gives? A side stitch is likely caused by irritation in the lining of your abdominal cavity, specifically the parietal peritoneum, a thin layer of tissue that supports your organs and hates being yanked around. When your breathing doesn't match your movement, like taking shallow breaths while your stride's pounding away, it tugs on that lining, and that tugging triggers pain. Because it's wired into nerves around your diaphragm and core, it feels like it's stabbing you from the inside. It's not causing any damage, even though it absolutely feels like it might. Just your body's way of saying, hey, maybe coordinate your breathing with your movement next time. Or maybe it's trying to say, running is dumb. Have you considered pickleball? Yawning. Your dog yawns. You yawn. The person next to you yawns. Then your dog yawns again, like he started it and wants credit. But why do we yawn in the first place? For years, scientists thought it helped increase oxygen levels in your blood, like a deep breath for your brain. But that theory didn't hold up. People yawn just as much when their oxygen levels are fine. The latest theory is that yawning helps cool down your brain. When your brain gets too warm, like when you're tired, bored, or zoning out, it triggers a big gulp of fresh air to help cool the blood headed to your head. It's like popping open a car window for your frontal lobe. Here's the strange part. Yawns are truly contagious. Seeing, hearing, or even reading about a yawn can trigger one. But why? Some scientists think it's a leftover form of social bonding, a way to sync up energy levels or behavior in a group. And if someone doesn't yawn back, that might be a red flag. Research shows that people who don't catch yawns often score lower on empathy. Some studies even suggest that psychopaths and sociopaths are less likely to yawn in response to others. So if you yawn, and your friend just stares back at you, maybe sleep with one eye open, just to be on the safe side. Butterflies in your stomach. You're about to give a speech, or walk into an interview, or send a risky text, and suddenly your stomach feels fluttery, like someone shook up a jar of moths and dumped it into your gut. That's not your imagination. Butterflies in your stomach is a real physical response. When you get nervous, your body floods with adrenaline and redirects blood to areas that matter most, like your muscles and brain. Your digestive system is not a priority. Blood flow there drops. Muscles in your gut tighten. And that tension creates the strange, fluttery feeling. You're not actually in danger, but your nervous system doesn't care. It's trying to protect you from prehistoric stress, like being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Not from modern stress, like watching the 3-dot typing bubble and panicking about what might appear. Hiccups. You're mid-sentence, maybe even mid-sip, and suddenly, hic, your diaphragm just glitched. That's the dome-shaped muscle under your lungs that helps you breathe. Normally, it contracts to pull air in, and relaxes to let it out. But sometimes it spasms, and when it does, your vocal cords slam shut, making that awkward little hic sound. But why does it happen? No one's 100% sure. Scientists think it's a misfire in your body's reflex loop, between your brainstem, vagus nerve, and phrenic nerve. The vagus nerve helps with swallowing and digestion. The phrenic nerve controls your diaphragm, and the brainstem handles automatic functions like breathing. When something irritates that system, like eating too fast, drinking something fizzy, or getting cold too quickly, it can trigger a burst of mixed signals. And if it happens to you a lot, blame a hypersensitive reflex arc. Some people are just wired that way. Most hiccups stop on their own, but not before a friend tells you to hold your breath, drink upside down, or get jump-scared by someone in the kitchen. None of those are proven. But hey, at least they're distracting. Pins and needles. You've been sitting cross-legged for a while, half listening to a podcast. When you finally try to stand, your foot says, absolutely not, as it lights up with tiny stabbing sparks, buzzing, tingling, impossible to ignore. That's paresthesia, the medical term for abnormal sensations caused by pressure or damage to peripheral nerves. When you compress a nerve, by sitting on your leg, leaning on your elbow, or falling asleep in a position you probably shouldn't have, it messes with the way your nerves send signals. Your body's like, oh, we're offline now? Nice. Then, when the pressure lifts and blood flow returns, the nerve fires off a burst of disorganized signals, like it's trying to re-establish contact all at once. That's why you get weird sensations like tingling, burning, numbness, or what can only be described as invisible ants with tiny tasers. To be more specific, your sensory neurons, the ones that report back to the brain, go rogue and start misfiring. Your brain's like, is that touch? Pain? Temperature? Itching? I don't know. Better just make it all hurt. When that pins and needles sensation doesn't go away or keeps coming back, it could be a sign of a nerve problem or a condition like diabetes or multiple sclerosis. But most of the time, it's just your body's way of telling you to move, shift your weight, or that maybe your legs weren't designed to sit in yoga poses like that. Tinnitus. Everything's quiet, no TV, no phone, no distractions. And then it starts. That high-pitched ringing in your ears that nobody else seems to hear, like your brain just tuned into a secret radio frequency that doesn't exist. That's tinnitus, the perception of sound without any actual external noise. What you're hearing isn't coming from your environment. It's coming from inside your own auditory system. Most often, tinnitus is linked to damage in the hair cells inside your cochlea, the spiral-shaped structure in your inner ear that translates sound vibrations into electrical signals your brain can understand. When those tiny hair cells are damaged, usually from age or noise exposure, the signals they send become weaker or irregular. In response, the brain turns up its sensitivity, trying to compensate for the missing input. In other words, no signal detected, guess I'll fill in the blanks myself. That ringing, buzzing, or hissing noise is just sound your brain invented to make up for the silence. Sometimes tinnitus is linked to hearing loss, earwax buildup, or even jaw tension. Other times, it just shows up without cause or warning. The worst part? The more you focus on it, the louder it seems to get. Eye twitch. It always shows up uninvited. A little flicker in your eyelid, like your face is trying to send Morse code. It's not painful. It's not serious. It's just extremely annoying. That's an eye twitch, or myokymia, a brief involuntary spasm of the orbicularis oculi, a muscle that surrounds the eye. Most of the time it shows up when you're tired, stressed, overcaffeinated, or all three. Eye muscles are controlled by the facial nerve, the same one that lets you blink, smile, and frown. When you're run down, overstimulated, or glued to a screen for too long, the facial nerve gets more reactive and starts firing off tiny bursts of electrical activity, even when it shouldn't. Add in a mild electrolyte imbalance, like low levels of magnesium, potassium, or calcium, and the muscles around your eye become more sensitive, twitching in response to signals that wouldn't normally register. An eye twitch usually goes away on its own, no treatment needed, but if it sticks around for more than a week or spreads to other parts of your face, it could be a sign of something more serious, like a nutritional deficiency or an underlying neurological problem. In most cases, it's just your nerves having a minor meltdown. Nothing personal. Joint popping. You shift your weight. Something in your back goes pop. Or maybe it's your knees when you stand, your neck when you turn. That sudden crack or click that sounds like something just broke. It didn't. That noise is called cavitation. And no, it's not as bad as it sounds. Most of the time it comes from gas bubbles inside the synovial fluid, the lubricant that keeps your joints moving smoothly. When pressure inside the joint changes, those bubbles collapse or shift, and that creates the familiar popping sound. Other times it's from tendons or ligaments moving over bony surfaces. As you move, they stretch slightly, then snap back into place, a harmless mechanical slip that makes more noise than trouble. Sometimes that pop even feels good, not because anything's gone back into place, but because it momentarily reduces joint pressure or stimulates nearby nerves. It's not a fix, but it can reset tension just enough to help you move easier. If there's no pain, swelling, or loss of motion, there's nothing to worry about. But if the popping comes with discomfort or starts to limit your range, it might be time to check what's really going on underneath. Hypnic jerk. You're seconds from sleep, that strange in-between place where your thoughts are fuzzy and your limbs go slack, and then suddenly your whole body jerks like the ground just dropped out from underneath you. That's a hypnic jerk, also called a sleep start, a sudden involuntary muscle spasm that happens during the transition from wakefulness to sleep. It feels random, but it's tied to a shift deep in your brain. As your body relaxes and your heart rate slows, your reticular activating system, the part of your brainstem responsible for keeping you awake and alert, begins to shut down. At the same time, your motor control systems are still partially online. The overlap creates a moment of confusion. Your muscles go slack, but your brain hasn't fully signed off yet. It misreads the drop in muscle tone as a sign that something's gone wrong. In response, your brain sends a jolt of neural activity down the spinal cord just to snap everything back online. Some theories suggest it's a primitive reflex left over from evolutionary survival mechanisms, like your brain reacting to muscle relaxation as a signal that you're falling from a tree. Sleep is supposed to be simple, but even as your body powers down, part of your brain keeps watching, just in case.
Thanks for watching this marathon of everything that makes being human feel just a little unreal.